All right, happening now. I'm Hermela Argawi. You're streaming CBS 10 Los Angeles. We're going to move to LAUSD Superintendent Austin Beutner's briefing happening now. Let's take a look.
And $250,000 from Chuck Lorre to LA students most in need. This past week also saw a donation of $20 from a retired teacher and the offer of 3 gently used computers from an elderly woman who was watching TV, saw the plight of children, and wanted to help those in need. Please join us in this effort. Every little bit helps. There's a great deal of speculation about when we might return to schools. The answer? Simple. As soon as we can when it's safe and appropriate. Less simple is not when, but how. Health authorities will need to provide clear answers on several important questions to help us answer the how. First, what testing is available to make certain an individual is not carrying the virus? Is that test current? And how are those who tested positive or negative being tracked? And finally, what's the risk of exposure at a school, and could that cause an individual to bring the virus home with them? In ordinary times, as many as 1 million people might be in our schools on any given day. Students and school staff in classrooms, and families and visitors to school events like musical performances and football games. Those 1 million people go home to a couple million more people. We closed schools before there was any known occurrence of the virus in schools to mitigate the spread of the disease, and it seems to have made a difference. At the same time, we're all aware that in the long run, there's no economy without education. And in the short run, there's a much smaller economy without the child care and safety net public schools provide to working families. This balance between the health risks and the need to reopen the economy is one which will need careful evaluation and an open public conversation in the many weeks ahead as health authorities provide all of us with more information. We'll continue to make the safety of all in our school community, students, staff, families, and visitors, a priority as we plan to reopen school facilities. The other important piece of our return to schools will be to help students recover from the missed learning opportunities. This will be critical for students who are most impacted by the absence from school, and in particular, those who might be less capable of working independently, our youngest learners, students with learning differences and disabilities, and English learners. We expect to place an increased effort on elementary students with more reading and math teachers at every grade level and additional support to help all students address the social and emotional issues this crisis may have caused. I spoke many months ago about our plans to do this in our highest need schools. In light of the current situation, we need to extend that effort to all elementary school students. Call it a primary promise, if you will. A promise to make sure every child has a foundation in literacy, math skills, and critical thinking before they finish elementary school. We owe it to every child to provide them with the education they deserve. And the cost to children in society if we don't far outweighs the investment we need to make now. It may sound counterintuitive to be talking about increased spending in education in the midst of looming state budget issues, but it's necessary. Unless we're prepared to sacrifice a generation of boys and girls who are counting on a great education as a path out of poverty. We're far enough into this crisis we can begin to estimate the cost for our schools. At the outset, we said we're going to do the right thing for students and families and the right thing for our employees who serve students and families. That remains our objective. As the chart shows, we're expecting to incur almost $200 million in additional costs during the remainder of this school year because of the virus. It'll take some time as well as public and political support to make sure we're properly reimbursed by local, state, and federal government for these investments we're making in students and families. The portion of costs that's not budgeted includes $9 million for safety equipment and supplies. We've already exceeded the initial amount provided by the state, and will spend more in the coming weeks to provide proper equipment for those involved in the relief efforts. $78 million providing meals to children and adults. In these extraordinary times, we'll continue to help all who are in need, and in the absence of a broader food relief effort by the city or county, we've stepped up to help. $23 million to help address the digital divide. We're able to use bond funds for a portion of the investment in technology, but providing an internet connection to students who cannot afford one at home is also necessary if we're to serve all students. It should be the responsibility of other government agencies, the FCC at the federal level, or the Public Utility Commission at the state level to address this challenge. But in the absence of action by others, We'll address the issue and sort out the costs later. We'll invest $31 million in training for educators. As was true 50 years ago for the NASA engineers and scientists leading efforts to reach the moon, training and preparation will play a critical role in our efforts. It's worth noting other school districts chose to stop instruction for a period of weeks to train educators. We believe maintaining relationships with students and providing continuity of learning during this time is quite critical, in particular for our most vulnerable students. So we kept schools open and asked educators to work with students and participating in the training at the same time. If we'd simply shut down while the training occurred, we would have incurred costs of about $100 million per week with no connection to students. We'll be making an additional $50 million investment in summer school. Study after study tells us breaks in school significantly impact student learning. We're planning a major effort this summer and will refine this early estimate in families most in need. All purchases have been made with every attempt to secure the best price possible given the circumstances. In normal times, the state of California would pass a budget by June 30th, which provides the foundation for Los Angeles Unified's budget for the school year which begins July 1st. About 90% of school funding is provided by the state and the remainder by the federal government. We expect the state will delay the passage of a complete budget until later in the year and will also delay the deadline for local control accountability plans school districts typically complete along with their budgets. It's important to note state law prescribes March 15th as the last date for school districts to make any significant changes to staffing in schools, so we don't anticipate significant reductions in the coming school year. The Board of Los Angeles Unified will be meeting in the coming weeks to review these issues and make any final decisions about the budget for the coming school year as the state issues further guidance. We continue to make progress in providing every student with a device and already have a significant number of schools where 100% of the students are connected. In the few short weeks since we first shared this information, we've reduced the number of high school students who are not connected to their school community from more than 15,000 students to less than 3,000. Great progress, but we're continuing to work to reach every student we can. The gap continues to close at elementary schools as devices arrive. The population we serve is quite transient, so we may not reach every student who is in our schools on March 13th, but we'll continue to make the effort. To the best of our knowledge, Los Angeles Unified is the only large public school district which is sharing this level of information about both the challenge and the work to reach these goals. I've spoken before about the need to make sure students are engaged. In a traditional school setting, we measure attendance and look for more subtle forms of engagement. Is a student behaving appropriately within the school norms? Does she or he feel they're part of the school community? And most importantly, are they using different approaches and showing progress in their learning? We're in the early days in the transition to online education, and educators are still figuring out how to solve this puzzle. There are lots of pieces, and all will have to fit carefully together in the work to address the unique needs of each student. As the chart shows, we can measure how often students are online and for how long, whether they're engaged in discussions about their studies, and if they're turning in assignments. And we can do this by grade or school level and for different types of students. But we're still exploring some of the more subtle things one can observe in a classroom. How are students feeling? Are they connected to their classmates and teachers? And are they growing as individuals and as students? Educators will continue to refine their thinking on this, and we'll share more in the coming weeks as they do. Let's take a deeper look at